When the news finally broke, it spread quietly but powerfully across the United Kingdom. Television screens all over the country displayed the same headline. Prince William confirms tragic update on King Charles's health. Within moments, those words traveled through homes, newsrooms, and social media feeds. The entire nation froze, sensing that something deeply serious had finally been confirmed. For months, there had been rumors about King Charles's health, his treatments, his absence from certain events, his visibly weaker appearances. But now, the truth came directly from his son, the future king, who spoke with a tone heavy with sorrow. It wasn't just another official royal statement. It was a son speaking from his heart. Outside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere was unlike anything seen since Queen Elizabeth II passed away. People gathered silently at the gates, holding flowers, candles, and their phones, unsure whether to hope or to prepare for the worst. Reporters lined the streets near the palace, waiting for any sign or update. The windows remained closed, and no sound came from within. Across the world, William's short but emotional statement was replayed over and over. "My father's condition is stable, but his illness is incurable. We are cherishing the time we have together." Those two words, incurable and cherishing, hit everyone like a wave. It made clear that King Charles's battle was nearing its most difficult stage. The king's health had been the subject of speculation since early 2024, when it was announced that he had been diagnosed with cancer. The palace tried to remain optimistic, releasing brief updates that spoke of rest, recovery, and resilience. But behind the polished royal statements, insiders whispered that the treatments were taking a heavier toll than anyone expected. The king continued to fulfill his duties, meeting ambassadors, signing documents, and attending events. But his energy was visibly fading. Every appearance seemed to cost him more. Even in photographs, he looked thinner, his smile softer, as if each moment in public required enormous effort. To understand how this moment arrived, one has to look back at the younger Charles. In his youth, he was strong, athletic, and deeply connected to nature. He loved polo, hiking, and gardening. He would rise early to ride horses through the Scottish Highlands, ignoring rain, mud, and even injuries. Those close to him described him as determined, sometimes to the point of stubbornness. He hated to show weakness. But over time, small health troubles began to appear. In 1998, he had surgery on his knee, and a few years later, he had a hernia operation. Both times, he returned to public duties almost immediately, smiling for the cameras, joking with the hospital staff, pretending it was nothing. Yet privately, he began to reflect on his body and the limits of endurance. There were more minor scares over the years, a growth removed from his nose, a few hard falls during polo matches that left him bruised or concussed. Once, after being thrown from a horse, doctors worried about a possible head injury. But Charles insisted on finishing the game. It became part of his character. Duty before pain. Tradition before comfort. That mindset defined him for decades, and in many ways, became his greatest strength and greatest burden. Then came the pandemic in 2020. When it was revealed that Charles had tested positive for COVID-19, the country collectively held its breath. He was 71, considered high risk, but he recovered quickly and continued to work remotely from Scotland. His recovery was celebrated as a sign of strength. Yet, close observers began noticing subtle changes afterward: fatigue, shorter public events, and a quiet dependence on his aides. It wasn't alarming then, but it marked the beginning of a gradual decline. In early 2024, the palace made an unusually open announcement that the king would undergo treatment for an enlarged prostate. The honesty was praised as refreshing. He seemed cheerful when leaving the hospital, waving to well-wishers. But only weeks later, more serious news came. Follow-up tests had revealed something more dangerous. By February, Buckingham Palace confirmed that Charles had been diagnosed with a form of cancer, though they did not specify which kind. This secrecy added to the sense of unease. The monarch who had always symbolized strength and duty was now facing something even he could not control. Months passed, and the pattern became familiar. Hospital stays, cautious optimism, and short returns to work. Each palace statement was carefully written, assuring the public that things were routine or precautionary. But those who saw him up close knew the truth. The treatments were exhausting. His once lively face had become pale, his posture slightly stooped. Still, he kept working. He met the Prime Minister weekly, signed papers, and made short public addresses. That was his way, to serve until he physically could not. When Prince William finally spoke publicly about his father's condition, the world knew it was serious. The announcement came during a charity event in London. William stood at the podium, calm but visibly emotional. "My father has faced his illness with the courage we all know him for," he said. "But we have reached a stage where we must accept that some battles are not meant to be won, only met with grace." The room fell completely silent. His words spread faster than any official statement ever could. It was raw, human, and deeply moving. The reaction from the public was overwhelming. Thousands sent messages of support to the palace. People gathered outside Windsor Castle to light candles and pray. Even critics of the monarchy expressed sympathy. For many Britons, King Charles represented a bridge between the past and the future, a steady hand after the long reign of Queen Elizabeth. Now his illness felt like the closing of a chapter in British history. Behind the scenes, it became clear that Prince William had already begun taking on many of his father's responsibilities. Insiders revealed that King Charles had accepted his condition with calm acceptance. He was reportedly recording personal messages, writing letters, and speaking to the Archbishop of Canterbury about his final wishes. Friends described him as thoughtful and peaceful, focused on legacy rather than fear. He had 3 hopes, they said: that the monarchy continues to modernize, that his 2 sons find peace with each other, and that the people of Britain never forget the humanity behind the crown. Under Charles's reign, the royal family had already begun to change. He had encouraged a slimmed-down monarchy, focusing only on core duties and transparency. Prince William and Catherine became the face of this new era, approachable, modern, and deeply involved in charitable causes. William's Earthshot Prize and Catherine's early childhood work were clear reflections of the king's vision for a monarchy that serves the people rather than simply represents them. Catherine, even while facing her own health struggles, continued her public work and raised their 3 children with grace. Many see her as the quiet strength of the royal family, much like Queen Elizabeth once was. Queen Camilla, too, has played a crucial role during this period. She has taken on more royal duties, hosted foreign dignitaries, and maintained composure through intense public attention. Her devotion to Charles during his illness, reading to him, praying with him, and ensuring his comfort, has softened public opinion toward her. Once viewed as controversial, she is now seen as a symbol of loyalty and endurance. Princess Anne, the king's sister, has continued to be one of the hardest-working members of the royal family. Her steady dedication and sense of duty have become a model for everyone around her. Those inside the palace say she has been a quiet guide to Prince William, helping him adjust to his growing responsibilities as he prepares to take on the role of king one day. But one member of the family remains a source of sadness for King Charles, Prince sighed. Harry, the younger son, has lived far from the UK for years, separated from royal life. His relationship with his father has improved slightly after the diagnosis, with a few phone calls and one short visit, but it remains fragile. Insiders say Charles often speaks of both his sons with love and hope, wishing that time and compassion will bring them back together. Harry, too, is reportedly conflicted, torn between his new life abroad and the emotional pull to be near his family during this time. Whether he returns before the inevitable happens remains one of the monarchy's most emotional questions. Meanwhile, Prince William is quietly taking on the responsibilities of a king in waiting. He attends state meetings, signs documents, and represents the monarchy abroad. Yet, behind his calm demeanor, those close to him say he is struggling. Watching his father grow weaker while preparing to succeed him is a heartbreaking reality. He carries both the duty of a prince and the pain of a son facing loss. Now, Many in Britain are wondering about the future. Could King Charles step down and let William take over before his passing? It's rare, but not impossible. The last time a British monarch abdicated was in 1936, when Edward VIII gave up the throne for love. But Charles's case is different. He views his reign as sacred, something to be carried to the end. Instead of abdication, it's more likely that existing royal laws will allow William and Camilla to continue handling royal duties in his name. A quiet transition already taking place. As the days go by, the images of this royal family facing change fill the news. Cameras capture Prince William leaving the hospital, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses, his face pale with fatigue. Crowds wait outside with sympathy, knowing they are witnessing history unfold. Inside the palace, the king spends more time in reflection and with those closest to him. Each day feels like part of a long, gentle farewell. The sense of an ending hangs in the air. The man who waited 70 years to become king may now be nearing the end of his journey sooner than anyone expected. Yet even as his strength fades, his influence remains. Through his words, his reforms, and his example of quiet courage, King Charles has reminded the world that true leadership is not just about power. It's about dignity, compassion, and grace, even in the face of mortality. As Britain holds its breath, cherishing the time that remains, one truth has become clear. The bond between father and son, between past and future, is what will carry the monarchy forward. And when the time finally comes for the crown to pass, it will do so not in sorrow alone, but with deep gratitude for a man who served his people with heart, even as his own began to fade. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere had grown quieter but full of meaning. Every corridor seemed to carry the soft echo of history in motion. Behind closed doors, staff worked carefully, preparing for what they all knew would one day come. Important documents were updated, royal ceremonies were outlined in detail, and every possible scenario was quietly rehearsed. It wasn't only about formality anymore. There was tenderness in every action. Those close to the king spoke of how Charles still made time to write personal thank you notes to his staff, asking daily about the palace gardens, the weather, and even small updates from around the world. Even as his strength faded, his interest in life and nature never dimmed. His reign, though not long, had already left a deep mark. It was a reign built on kindness, modern values, and a sense of compassion that bridged the gap between ancient tradition and the realities of the modern world. For Prince William, the future had become both certain and overwhelming. The path ahead was now clearer than ever. He would soon become king. But with that destiny came the immense challenge of carrying his father's legacy while also uniting a family and a nation preparing for change. His calm, steady tone and thoughtful words already reflected the weight of that responsibility. One royal historian remarked that the crown had already begun to rest on William's shoulders, not yet officially, but in every sense that mattered. Britain once again stood on the edge of change, as it had so many times before in its long royal history. The image of King Charles waving from a car window, looking frail but still dignified, stayed in people's minds. It became a symbol of courage and humanity. When Prince William spoke publicly about his father's condition, his voice shook slightly but carried strength. That moment gave shape to the truth the nation had quietly feared. The monarchy, just like the man who led it, was mortal. Yet in that mortality, the royal family found its greatest human strength: endurance, grace, and love. Whether King Charles's reign would last a few more months or several years, his legacy was already secure. It was written in the way he served his people, the way he led his family, and the grace with which he faced the end. In the days that followed, the entire United Kingdom seemed to move in slow motion. Life continued, but there was an unspoken heaviness in the air. It was as if the country was holding its breath. Around Buckingham Palace, crowds formed in silence. Some people brought flowers, others brought candles, and many just stood quietly, watching the palace windows as though they might see a shadow move behind the curtains. Across Britain, people gathered outside other royal residences: Sandringham, Windsor, and Balmoral, places tied to memories of the king's life. Outside Clarence House, the sidewalk became a sea of bouquets and handwritten notes. Many messages were simple but deeply moving. "Thank you for your grace," one card read. Another said, "For king and country, always." The palace guards remained at their posts as usual, motionless and proud beneath a sky that seemed heavy with emotion. That same week, the Prime Minister paid a private visit to the king. It was described as a short meeting, but those close to both said it had been deeply meaningful. No official details were shared, but it became clear that the conversation had not been about policy or politics. Instead, it had been about legacy, about how the nation would carry forward when the time came. Those who heard about it said that Charles had spoken softly but with certainty. "The crown endures," he said. "It always has, and it always will." His faith in the continuity of the monarchy never wavered. Inside his private quarters, King Charles spent his days surrounded by things he loved most: books, letters, and music. His beloved dogs often lay by the window, and Queen Camilla would sit nearby reading to him, sometimes from poetry, sometimes from scripture. Visitors said that there was a sense of calm around him, not born from denial, but from acceptance. He seemed at peace with his place in time, knowing that life, history, and duty would all move forward as they always had. "He has made his peace with time," one aide quietly said. "He knows the world will carry on. He just hopes it carries on kindly." When summer arrived in 2025, the royal family gathered at Balmoral. Prince William, Catherine, and their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, traveled there for what aides described as a private family visit. The children played on the green lawns, laughing and running under the same trees where their grandfather had once played as a boy. They were too young to understand the weight that hung over the adults. For William, that visit was bittersweet. He knew this might be one of the last times his children would see their grandfather as they remembered him: gentle, humorous, full of curiosity about every flower and bird. Charles had asked them to visit, saying he wanted to show them the gardens one last time. That evening, father and son shared a private conversation that lasted nearly 2 hours. There were no cameras, no advisors, no staff, just the 2 of them sitting together as the Scottish dusk settled over the hills. Later, those close to the family said William came out of the room with tears in his eyes but calm in his expression. He said his father was proud of him, a confidant recalled. He said everything that needed to be said. Meanwhile, rumors swirled about Prince Harry's possible return. The press waited at Heathrow Airport, scanning each flight for a glimpse of him. Days passed with no sign. Then one evening, without any announcement, a black SUV was seen entering the palace gates. The next morning, the palace confirmed that Harry had privately visited his father. The meeting lasted less than an hour, but it was said to be deeply emotional. Whatever was spoken between them remained private, but those close to both brothers said it was the first step toward healing a long and painful divide. As the news spread, the tone in the press shifted. Instead of speculation about succession or health, the focus turned to reflection. Newspapers began publishing long tributes about Charles's life. They revisited his decades as Prince of Wales, his lifelong environmental work, and his dedication to art, architecture, and culture. Old footage resurfaced, Charles planting trees, comforting flood victims, sketching landscapes in his notebook. Commentators began to describe him as a man ahead of his time, someone who had spoken about the environment before it became a global priority, someone who believed in duty when the world often celebrated self-interest. His reign might be short, they said, but his influence would last far beyond it. Public feeling across the country reflected that deep respect. Vigils continued each evening outside Buckingham Palace, where candles flickered softly in the night. Choirs gathered to sing hymns of hope and comfort. Union Jack flags hung at half-mast, not because of royal instruction, but because people felt it was right. Even those who had once questioned the monarchy now spoke of admiration for the way Charles had faced his illness, with quiet dignity and no spectacle. For a short while, Britain seemed united again, not by politics or ceremony, but by empathy.